Okay, I started this episode of the Amanda Show by mentioning that a new world order is taking place right in front of us, and I am so excited. So, the BRICS Summit took place in Kazan, Russia. It just rounded off 2 days ago, as I when I'm recording this, but you're definitely going to be seeing it a lot longer. Anyway, it just rounded off 2 days ago, and a lot of things were discussed. Obviously, I can't go into every single thing that went down in Kazan, but I want to just do a summary of what's going on, particularly from an African perspective. A lot of world leaders were there, like the president of course, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, because it's taking place in Russia. But we also had the president of China, Xi Jinping. We had the prime minister of India present. We had the president of Iran. We had the prime minister of Ethiopia. We had the president of South Africa. A lot of world leaders. Even if it wasn't a president in the case of maybe Saudi Arabia, it was represented by the foreign ministry or top officials of the government. Now, let's start by talking about what is BRICS. So, BRICS is an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It started as four, but then much later, South Africa was welcomed into the group. It was really just a case of developing nations coming together and to get things done. But funny enough, ever since 2022, BRICS has taken a more prominent place in global conversation. So it's looking like BRICS is becoming the architecture of the new world order. In 2022, after Russia marched into Ukraine, a lot of sanctions were levied against Russia. Russia was cut off from the US global financial system, including they didn't have access to SWIFT, and they were not allowed to use the dollar. A lot of things. So now BRICS, it's not more like the whole the world saw that thing happen to Russia, the whole world was scared. Like if a global behemoth like Russia can experience this, what about smaller nations? You get or nations that have never even that are not world powers. So that was the incentive for people to countries and individuals around the world to begin to look for alternative structures of global governance and economic system outside of the US dominated system. So if you don't know, ever since World War II, United States became the sole superpower of the world. For a while there was the Soviet Union, but once the Soviet Union collapsed, the United States became the almighty go-to, and so the world followed, the US global system. But now things are changing in the global system, meaning that it's no longer US dominated. In fact, Professor John Mearsheimer says it became a multipolar world in 2017. So, what is the multipolar world? Multipolar world is that there's not just one center of power in the global system, meaning just the United States, as it has been for several decades. Now, Professor John Mearsheimer argues that from 2017, when China became economic superpower and then militaries began to follow, China became another pole. So it was US, it used to be the unipolar world, that is just the United States, but now there's China and Russia. Interestingly, Russia is also another pole. So that's when you hear things like multipolar world, meaning it's not just the US commanding and controlling everything. So right now there are other superpowers rising up in different parts of the world. So that's the whole thing with the multipolar system. The United States is not the only power. It's not the hegemon anymore. We have China, we have Russia. But interestingly, we also begin to see countries like India take its stance. We are seeing the Arab world and even Africa. Right now, Africa may seem to be the one that has yet to get its act together. But that is one of the reasons why we have this show, so that we can create a strong pole in Africa, representing Africa's interest on the global scale and the global conversation. So it's not just going to be anybody coming to tell Africa what to do. Africa can make its own decisions. Africa can take care of itself, can take care of its peoples, can take care of its economies, can take care of its security and the rest of it. Now back to BRICS. So following the BRICS summit, the BRICS countries, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and then last year, yes, was last year in South Africa, they welcomed or they sent invitation to Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. Argentina turned it down, said they are not interested, but the other countries accepted and they became part of the BRICS system. So right now in this year in Russia, they didn't include new members. They just had welcome partner members. And three African nations are among the partner members, and these nations are Nigeria, um, Algeria, and Uganda. Now, I want to mention something before I proceed. I found it very weird that in such a momentous occasion like this, Nigeria was not represented, not by the president, but vice president, or any government official. I get it that you want to be pro US, pro West, which is fine because the Nigerian government, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and just not just this Nigerian government, even the previous one, Nigeria has always been pro West, which is okay. I found it very weird that Nigeria chose to be absent, even if now it's been welcomed to become a partner country. But it's momentous occasion like this when the global economic system, the new global order is being formed. Nigeria decided not to show up, even if you're pro-West. Countries like Saudi Arabia, for example, Saudi Arabia, you cannot be more pro-West, more pro-US than Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was there, even if MBS, that's the ruler of Saudi Arabia, even if he wasn't there. But Saudi Arabia was represented by a top government official. The reason that Saudi Arabia gave for not being the leader of Saudi Arabia gave for not being there is because of what's going on in the Middle East now. Fine. But let's say MBS decided to say, oh, I'm still a US friend. Okay, let's take that. But Saudi Arabia was represented by a top government official. Why was Nigeria not there? That's the funny thing. Each time the global economy and the global order was formed through the most recent history that we're aware of, never has Africa been consulted. When it was the European led global order, who asked you in Africa? Nobody. When they cut up Africa in Berlin in 1884 like a pie, and the European powers said, I will take care, I will take care, you will take care, and they shared Africa among themselves. Who consulted us in Africa? Nobody. Europe fell after World War II, and United States became the global hegemon and the sole superpower. When United States became the sole superpower and they were constructing the new world order, who asked us in Africa? Nobody. We were not invited to the table. They decided there that they will in the Bretton Woods system about the IMF, and the IMF has turned out to be one of the worst things that happened to Africa's economy. Nobody consulted you. They decided that the whole world was going to stake itself to the US dollar. Who consulted us in Africa? Nobody. Now we are seeing the multipolar world take shape, and Africa has been invited to the table to take part not just in the conversation about the way the world will take shape, but also to be a part of, you know, deciding what to do here and how to do what, so that it will be in the interest of Africa. And a country like Nigeria, the most populous nation in Africa, decided to sit this one out. I don't think there's really any way you can make this make sense to me. I really don't think so. Make it make sense. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, please make it make sense. How Nigeria was absent. They are deciding how the world is going to run in the future. From now, really, because the US order is over. In fact, last week I was watching a video by Condoleezza Rice. She's the former Secretary of State of the United States. And in the video, she was saying several things. One of the things that she said was that it was an interview. One of the things that she said was that United, no matter how much, because right now there's clamor that United States should go back to protectionist system where it just focuses on itself. Because a lot of Americans, particularly the MAGA sect in the United States, they're complaining that the United States has collapsed, that they need to focus on US to make it strong again, everything. So she said something. She made an argument that no matter what happens, United States cannot stay away from the global system. That United States has to be a part of it because if United States chooses to stay out of this global system, she even agreed it's a multipolar world. Biden has agreed. What's this guy's name? The current Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has said, okay, fine, it's a multipolar world now. It's not a US-led order anymore. So what they are discussing now is how can they create a new global order that United States can still dictate the terms and conditions of this global order. That's the conversation that is taking place now. So she said that even if the United States chooses to sit out of it, Russia and China are going to create the new world order. And if Russia and China creates the new world order, it will not be in the interest of the United States because whatever it is they may choose to create may not be in the interest of the United States. So I said that to highlight that Americans are completely aware that a new world order is taking shape and they want to structure one that will benefit them. They're not asking you. They are not asking any of us in Africa. Yes, another global order restructuring was taking place in Kazan, Russia, and they said, okay, everybody should come. They opened it up, everybody, even the United Nations head, he was there. This is the UN that is, everybody knows is the ultimate pro-US institution. The guy was there. Antonio Guterres, he was there. And Nigeria chose to sit out. Like I need to, this that's why I said this thing has to make sense. It has to make sense to me. Countries like Congo, they were not, they are not partner, they are not members of BRICS. They're not even partners, like they were not invited to become partner nations of BRICS. Yet the president of Congo was in Kazan and no official of Nigeria was there. So a new world order is taking place and you chose to oh my Jesus. See, we need to become more intentional in Africa. Many of our leaders just sit down, they cross their arms for things to happen. And every time we have behaved like this and things happen, it has never been in the interest of Africa. So we have seen that the people that the world order and the world systems have benefited all these years are those who took part in it. Not just took part in, okay, now this is the world system coming. No, who took part in the creation of it. That is it. The only way you can be sure that a particular system is going to favor you is if you are part of the creation. And Nigeria chose to sit out. The most populous nation on the continent chose to sit out. Up until 2024, this Nigeria has been the biggest economy of Africa. You chose to sit out. And then tomorrow you come and be saying you're giant of Africa. Which giant? A giant that is not part of a conversation. A giant that is not part of the molding of a new global architecture and a global system. Which giant? I'm really disappointed, honestly, but let's continue. Another thing I wanted to highlight about this BRICS conference that took place in Russia is the creation of new payment systems, global payment system in BRICS Bridge and BRICS Clear. Now, if you read the declaration of the BRICS Summit, they said that they're not saying they're coming to kick out Swift and the rest of them, no, or Euroclear. No, they didn't say any of those things. But all they kept saying that it's going to be a complement to the already existing thing. Okay, okay. I don't think it's a compliment though. But anyway, the bottom line is they are looking for, which is why I think Nigeria should have been here. They're looking for, they're creating, not looking for, they're creating a new global payment system outside of the US led system. And this global payment system is going to exist outside of the US dollar. People like us in Africa who keep buying things, many times you're going to hear, oh, we are strapped for dollar, we don't have enough dollar, we don't have, you say, use terms like we don't have foreign exchange, we don't have foreign. It's because many times with our debt obligations, and all the things we have to pay, and the fact that with many African countries we are not producers, we just consume, we just import, meaning that we are spending more dollar than we are making, than we are earning. So one of the things that's going to help Africa a lot is if we can if we can conduct international payments outside of the US dollar. It's going to be in our benefit. So this one now is not just that, oh, because I'm so pro United States, I'm going to hold myself to the dollar even as the dollar is sinking. No, at this point, every Africa and African nations, we need to look at it from our interest. Even if you're pro West, like Nigeria is, which is fine. I don't have an issue with it. But you need to take part. You need to be a part of the new architecture that is taking place. So when Nigeria say we are so pro-West, we are not going to cut ourselves off the US dollar. Even if every time Nigeria is short of dollar, as we speak, it is $1. Oh my Jesus! It is $1 to 1,700 naira. This is the worst in the history of Nigeria. So that's why I'm saying, as the BRICS is creating this new mode of payment outside of the US dollar, I don't know how it's going to work. We don't have the full details yet, but we know that it's going to have to do with basket of currencies. You can handle this with local. So, for example, in Nigeria, we can make, and Nigeria, our biggest import is from China. We don't have to do business with China with US dollar. Does not make any sense. In this instance, we can use this BRICS payment system to do it. meaning we are going to be we are going to be way less dependent on the US dollar, and it's for interest. So when we are doing deals with the United States, we can use the dollar, that's fine. When we are doing deals with South Africa, we don't have to use the dollar. When we are doing deals with India, we don't have to use the dollar because India is Nigeria's largest bilateral trade partner. We don't have to use the dollar. So if Europe, they say we must use dollar with them, fine, we can use dollar with Europe, we can use dollar with United States. But our major trading partners like China, India, we don't need the dollar. So this BRICS payment system that is being created now is in the interest of Africa. How can we be trading within ourselves in Africa? We are using dollar. Why? Why? A currency we do not have control over. Why? Hmm. It doesn't make any sense. And another thing that is going to help us is that this US based debt system. See, since recently, I have said it several times, right? A lot of African nations, they got their independence between the 1950s and the 1960s. By the 1970s, most of them were in debt. Most of them they were owing. Many countries in Africa are paying debt that we took since the 1970s. In fact, Nigeria just got approved. I believe it's $1.5 billion. The World Bank just approved that loan for Nigeria. Here's the funny thing. One of the conditions of that debt is that it has to be paid in either US dollar or one of these European currencies. And if you see the way the dollar has been rising, if we use that same method and say, okay, 30 years down the line, if these things keep going like this system continues like this, Nigeria is going to be paying way more. This 1.5 billion that we took today is going to be what, like in tens of billions 30 years down the line.
Nigeria has taken another IMF loan, this time for $2.5 billion, bringing Nigeria's total debt obligations to over $110 billion. I don't like this deal at all for Nigeria, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say this is more of an economic hitman type move, and I'm going to explain why. The terms of this IMF loan may seem fair at first glance. It's a $2.5 billion loan at 1% interest rate that will be paid off over 40 years, with no payment due for over 10 years. But here's the problem. The loan needs to be paid back in Western currencies, and the Naira is losing significant value every year, meaning this loan is going to end up costing tens of billions of dollars to Nigeria within a decade. From an economic sense, the effective interest rate would be 1% plus the depreciation of the Naira relative to the US dollar. In the past year, the Naira depreciated 50%, meaning the interest rate would be 51% if the Naira depreciation continues. This is an economy-destroying debt obligation, of course because payments don't start until 2034, when all the current politicians will be long gone when the loan starts to come due. I can understand why this was a tempting loan to take. But let's say the Naira depreciation is only 10% per year, which is very generous. Even in this best-case scenario, that means by 2034, the principal in this loan will effectively grow from $2.5 billion to $7 billion. The payments will then be the equivalent of $1 billion a year and continue for 30 years. So for $2.5 billion today, Nigeria is agreeing to pay the Western banks $30 billion under a 10% inflation rate. But even the loan itself comes with other concessions that should worry Nigerians. Nigeria will have to keep a large portion of this money as foreign reserves, so they can't even spend much of it. They also need to end subsidies on oil, which will hurt their economy, and they will need to enact reforms which will make it easier for Western banks to compete with the domestic Nigerian banks.
So we are going to actually be paying more than we took. Is this thing not a fraud? Is this thing not a fraud? Because first of all, the reason why a lot of our local currencies in Africa are going haywire is because of manipulation of the dollar, because it's not in our control. That's why it's going haywire. So at the end of the day, you are paying more than you actually took. So I've heard several people say this, and I'm really thinking it's true. If you take time to think, many of the loans we have taken since the beginning of Nigeria's existence as so-called independent nation. Since that, many of the loans we took, we have finished paying them. I mean, compile all of them together, the actual figures. We have finished paying them by now. Because if Nigeria is taking 1.5 billion in 2024 and 30, and several years down the line, it's going to be worth tens of billions of dollars. That is it. That is a fraud. That is a fraud. And I highlighted this because I want us to realize that this BRICS payment system is not going to be the Chinese yuan or the Russian ruble. No, we're not backing ourselves to it. It's going to, for now. We've not seen the full thing, but the way the conversation is looking now is going to be like a pool of currencies, And then there's also going to be a digital currency aspect of it. So if that's the way this thing goes, it's not like we are throwing our hearts behind China, or we are throwing ourselves behind Russia the way we threw ourselves behind the United States. No. This one is more equitable and fair. Now, considering the way this whole debt thing is going on, that with Africa going all over the place, and it's not really just with Africa. Also, all the countries in the world, even the United States, the United States is the biggest debtor in the whole world. But anyway, so the way this thing is going, it clearly shows that this system that the world has been running on since World War II, and particularly eclipsed after the collapse of the Soviet Union, this world order has not been a fair one. Even if I'm a proponent and I'm a big advocate of working with everybody, we can all agree that the way the world has run since the Second World War, that US, when the United States became the sole superpower, it has not benefited we developing nations. Because many of the, even in the declaration of BRICS, many of the things they kept saying was to allow equitable and fair development of the nations of the world. Because you tell me, how can you say it has, oh, Africa is backward because the Africans are, well, their culture is backwards, Africans are stupid, Africans are lazy, the normal nonsense they say. How can you say that is Africa is the reason why Africa has not developed, when you can see crony systems like the IMF and the World Bank? How can you say that? Because institutions were like this are the reasons why many developing nations have not developed. And it's not just an African thing. Yes, Africa looks like it has received the end of the stick. And let's not forget that many African countries just began to, they attempted to take their destiny in their own hands since from the 1950s, 1960s. And even till today, many of them are not independent. Many, apart from what we are seeing taking place in West Africa, and I'm coming to that much later in the third conversation we're having today, many of these African nations are not dependent. So tell me how you can develop when you are not in control of your political scene, or your, because outsiders keep imposing puppets in your countries, or your economic system. Look at the Francophone African nations. They don't print their currencies. So you see, the world is ripe for a multipolar world. Really. And when I say multipolar world, I don't want us in Africa to just relax on Russia and China and India. No, Africa needs to become a pole in itself. Africa, that's why we have this show. In fact, that is the reason I started this show. Because I want to bring things to our consciousness that Africa needs to become a pole in itself. So the Americans cannot come here to dictate to us what to do. The Russians cannot come here to dictate to us what to do. The Chinese cannot come here to dictate to us what to do. Which is why I said Nigeria should have been at the BRICS Summit in Kazan. Because most African nations were there. Most of us were there. So Africa, we need to become a pole that will take responsibility for our future, our political future, our financial future, our economic architecture, everything. So let's not rely and say, okay, the Russians and the Chinese, they're so nice and they're so noble, let's leave it in their hands. No. We don't know how tomorrow how things will change. The Russians and the Chinese can be looking really appealing to many African nations right now because we are sick of imperialism. I get it. But down the line, we don't know if these ones become imperial powers of themselves. So to safeguard our future, we should start building the African pole right now. So Africa will have a pole in this multipolar world. Let me know what you think about the BRICS summit that took place in Kazan, Russia, and also this whole conversation of multipolar world. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with your friends and your family so that we can amplify this voice as we seek to reach more Africans around the world to come together to build an African pole in this multipolar world.